Welcome back to beautiful Nicaragua and welcome to my coffee plantation. Right now we're in harvest season and it's been a lot of work, but today we're going to be talking about something very special and something that I think most people don't think about when they go drink that morning cup of coffee. I'm going to share with you how does climate impact a coffee plant, also impact us as coffee producers, and how does it affect the overall year while you're harvesting coffee. So let's go ahead and jump right in. So the challenge that you will find is that during harvest season, the plant's gonna start maturing its cherries. So essentially they'll start turning red. But if you have weather that rains too much, you have torrential downpours, or you have consistent rain throughout a week, the plant starts to mature its cherries a lot faster. So that means that if you had plans to start harvesting a week ago, but there was constant rain, then you need to harvest immediately. So you need to rush and go find people all around to try to get it to your farm before your coffee starts splitting like this and it ends up in the ground. So this is a big challenge with rain. And when it rains too much, it throws off the overall cycles when it starts budding, when the flowers come out. And also once the cherries are in the plant, it also complicates harvesting. So rain is a good thing, but when there's too much rain, it becomes a bad thing. So another thing I want to show you guys is that when there's a lot of rain, it just becomes very muddy. The conditions to pull coffee out of the mountains are incredibly difficult. Everyone is slipping and sliding, not to mention the vehicles. The vehicles are taking a beating because it's just so muddy and there's soil erosion everywhere. Everything starts to wash away. So you're just having that much more trouble getting coffee out of the mountains. So when you have a lot of rain and a coffee plantation all at once, it's not really a good thing and it impacts us pretty bad. So here's what we have in Nicaragua, a bandola. So the bandola refers to the branch of the coffee. So what you're seeing here is coffee cherries that need to be picked. Here you can take a look at some coffee cherries that we won't be able to use anymore because it's been raining so much, we weren't able to harvest them in enough time. So we will sort this, and what we will use are these ones right here that are good to go. So that's part of the rain. It's just too much rain and everything ripens and falls to the ground, some of the challenges, but we need the rain, so it has to be a balance. And this year has been specifically rainy more than usual. Last year and this month, it was already summer, it was hot. Right now it's been raining almost daily. So the rain's bad if it comes too much, but also what is bad is when there isn't enough rain. So when it's summer and it's really dry, it also becomes incredibly hot. So having coffee plantations out in the open becomes very difficult because the plant is working overdrive since it's always in photosynthesis when the sun hits the leaves and the plant starts to stress itself. So what we try to do here to avoid hot summers where the heat starts to rise up is that we start planting native trees to build an upper canopy to protect it from the sun, and that way we help the ecosystem and reforest the plantation. So essentially you want to design shade into your plantation and not have coffee exposed straight into the sun, because that is when it becomes a very big problem. In Brazil, this is how they harvest coffee, but they also need to put a lot of inputs into the ground, a lot of fertilization in order to make sure that the plant is nice and healthy. What we want here is to have an ecosystem where the trees provide the shade, it's nice, cool climate, and we don't need to put that much fertilizer in the plants, and it naturally produces a good tasting, delicious cup of coffee. So sun can be very impactful to the plant, especially if there's very dry periods. Some coffee plants tend to dry out. If you have in a climate where it doesn't rain at all, then you might need to do drip irrigation in your coffee. But here, thankfully, in the tropics of Nicaragua, in the tropical jungles, we get enough rain when we don't need to do that. So summer, it's a good thing because it dries out a little bit, but if it's excessive heat and you don't have your farm that's designed the right way, it's gonna impact your plantation and then your plants will start to struggle. Oh, whoa, I gotta balance myself here. So, along with summer, for some farms in some area, your water may dry up if it's really hot and it's continuous heat with no rain. Thankfully, here in the mountains, we have around 5 watering springs that are born in this coffee farm. So we never fully dry out, but there's been situations where we get close. What you're seeing here is actually a watering hole that's born up in the mountain, and it continuously flows throughout the year. So your water supply really becomes a concern when it's dead heat, Maybe if you're in a farm that's lower elevation and you don't have constant water supply, then you're gonna have to dig a well in order to keep things going. So summer can impact this a lot. You'll see a lot of the rivers just dwindle down during summer when it gets incredibly hot. This year's been a weird summer. It's still raining, so the water is nice and flowy, but we've had other challenges like the road conditions and also the cherries ripening on the plants too much. Then again, the water is something to protect, so we're always trying to plant bamboo and native plants around so we can keep this water stream going and flowing. So now the water, the sun, all cause concern, but what we haven't talked about is the temperature. So the temperature at night, if it gets really cold or if there's pockets of the farm where it doesn't get a lot of sunlight and there's constant shade at night, it's gonna get a couple degrees cooler, then the plant's not gonna like it. It really doesn't like super cold weather. So you'll start to see the leaves turn a little yellow, and then you have some little polka dots on the leaf, and then they'll start to fall. And this is what we call yellow here in Nicaragua, referring to ice, that is too cold. So when you do a coffee plantation, you want to make sure that you understand your airflow of the farm. Which direction does the air flow into the farm, and then which direction does the air leave? So that way when you're planting trees, you want to leave the inflow open if you want air in and the outflow open. And you don't block that, and you just plant trees along the side so you create a funnel. If you want to block airflow because maybe there's too much wind and you're damaging plants, then you would block your inlet and your outlet. So you have to think at your temperature and also your airflow, because if you leave your plants exposed to too much air, they're gonna damage your flowers, they'll damage your budding season, and it'll just be more difficult overall for the plant to produce. When you design your coffee plantation, you have to take that into consideration. Also, how are you gonna plant the trees to better mitigate that? So temperature is a big one. Most people don't think about it. Here in the farm, for example, that region behind me gets very cold because there's a creek running along. And so we need to open up some air and also open up some shade to let more sun in so it warms up. So think about the airflow and the temperature also when you're planting your coffee plantation. If you have an area of the farm that you know is exposed to the sun, you don't want to clean all the weeds away. What you want to do is you clean it once and you let it grow. So then you have this nice little bedding of grass or weeds on the top that's going to protect the soil from the heat. So the soil is going to be nice and cool, and eventually the plant will maintain its temperature because its root system won't heat up. If you look at here on the right side, they cleaned all their grass, which is good because it's still raining. It's gonna regrow. But in the summer, you kind of have to let it grow out a little bit. So it protects the plant and you manage temperature that way. So those are some of the tricks that you can play with. Now in the winter, you have to control these weeds. You can't let it grow more than 3 months because it's gonna overtake your plants. So essentially you wanna clean the plantation around 3 to 4 times a year. And during summer, let it grow a little bit and just let it be, so it helps protect your temperature. So that's some of the ways you can utilize nature, this beautiful ecosystem, to help you fight some of this temperature here. If you live in a very rainy area and you're designing your farm, in order to protect against soil erosion, you want to design your farm contour to the mountains. That means finding the level. If you take a look at the plantation behind me, it finds the level of the mountain, and that's where the rows of coffee are planted. And what that does is that slows down the flow of water coming down from all the way from the top, because it hits each level. And so essentially the flow becomes slower and the erosion becomes less and less. Also, when you build your trails in between the plantations, you can also dig some trenches, so that way you can catch some of the water and let it sit there, and it will slowly soak into the earth, and then you'll maintain the bottom humid. Most of the time what I see is that they don't think of flow of water, and a year later you have a landslide, or it's very difficult to work with the land because it just becomes a muddy mess. So right now, this plantation, I'm very happy with it. We planted rows of coffee along to contour. We built this trail behind me, and we also planted bananas along the trail so we can easily harvest plantains and bananas. Before I started farming here in Nicaragua, I used to work in corporate America behind the desk and keyboard. And I used to hear a lot about climate change and how it affects farmers. I never really understood the level of impact to that because it wasn't impacting my life at the time. But having come here and an avid coffee drinker, and I get to see all these producers out here in Nicaragua, and I've been living with the weather out here, it's kind of a reality that you can't escape You have to learn how to mitigate and work with. Each year we're seeing rain patterns, temperature patterns that shift and change. Some years it's very hot, some years it's very rainy. So it's hard to predict. So the best you can do is to have good practices in your farm to help mitigate that. So you can have all these things put in place to protect against soil erosion, the heat, the temperature, but still again, you're gonna have to battle climate change. So working with nature and not destroying nature, taking down the trees, instead planting trees, building roads that make sense, and drainage ditch, all can benefit you. But this battle is something that all farmers go through, and it makes pulling coffee out of the mountain that much more difficult. It makes producing coffee that much harder. And not only that, it's the genetics of coffee. So in order for coffee to taste well and have specialty, people seek higher elevation so the temperature remains cool. With the temperature rising, essentially we'll run out of higher elevations we can eventually go to. So where you can plant coffee is getting less and less. And so we'll see what happens in the future. Hopefully there's some developments with the varieties that can handle heat more, but that's a big factor that you have to think about. I want to show you guys something very cool too. Talking about planting along the contour, is what you can do also is you can design a little home to the plant. As you can see, this is the hillside. It would have continued normally down here and the water would have ran on top. But what we did is we made a casita, what we call here in Nicaragua, where you make a little home. So we chopped down and then we made a level plane. So when it rains now, the rain falls here. It doesn't wash away the fertilizer, and then you're able to maintain your fertilizer in the plant, give a plant a good home so there's not much soil erosion and it can thrive. So all these have been made across all the plantation. So each individual little coffee plant has their own home. And you can do this with trees, with anything in general. So this is an awesome tip here. So check out how cool this looks. This is a guayaba tree here. It's very common and popular in Nicaragua. And then right behind me, I have a banana tree. And then right underneath, I have a coffee tree. And right up above, I have a cedar tree. So all within this ecosystem, we produce coffee, we produce banana, and we produce guayaba. And it all works together. This keeps the temperature down, it gives organic matter, it helps with temperature management. We get bananas, and then we have cedar to be able to harvest later to build furniture. So this is what's beautiful about coffee, that if you drink coffee from farms or roasters that care about this stuff, you can actually make a change because you're giving back to the producer to continue planting more trees and maintaining this beautiful ecosystem here. Going back to the temperature, check out this beautiful pond behind me. We made this because we wanted to retain water to make sure that we can have water year round, and not only that, let the water slowly soak into the mountain. But what this water does also is reduce the temperature during summer, so it's nice and cool. But it also can become a problem because when it's very cold, the temperature becomes very frigid, so we have to open up some shade. But these kind of pools you can build in your upper sides of the farm so you can feed water through gravity, or you can build near your plantations to manage temperature. We also have tilapia in here which you can catch and eat. The ecosystem around is amazing. We planted all these bamboos so we can make sure we protect against soil erosion. So just another way to combat the weather. But what we did find is when there's a lot of rain, sometimes there's potential of flooding. This overfills. It might wash away the ponds further down. So there's some things to mitigate here with the rain, but overall a benefit having this pond here. So within the last hour that we've been filming here, it's already starting to rain. And it was just really hot when we woke up, and now the rain is here. So who knows when it's gonna go away, but that is the thing about these climates. They're kind of crazy right now in the tropics. And last year it wasn't even raining like this. So essentially, we have to continue to work with Mother Nature to fight this. And as coffee producers, it's just getting harder and harder to produce that delicious cup of coffee for you. Now, with having to battle excessive rains and washing away the roads, what we started doing is using recycled tires to build stairs. So right behind me, you can see the stair system that we've built all the way from the bamboo where we just were all the way to the top of the mountain. We're slowly building up areas that are very slippery, hard to work with recycled tires. Comment below, what do you think about this idea? Some people think it's not eco-friendly because we're using recycled tires, but other people say it is because it would have ended up in the landfill anyways. So I think it is. You let me know whether or not it is eco-friendly. Now, when it comes to drinking coffee, most people don't think about weather or maybe even consuming your food. But let me tell you, after having become a coffee producer, I now understand how impactful climate change is. Hopefully you found this video insightful, and as a consumer, you have the choice to consume from places that are actually making a change, planting trees, and working with Mother Nature to help fight against climate change. So make sure to subscribe to the channel. It is your Coffee Familia. I'll see you next week, my amigos.